Good evening. You're looking at a live shot of Westminster in London tonight, where in about 2 hours, British MPs will have their say in a second historic vote on Brexit, a do-or-die moment for the UK Prime Minister Theresa May. And we have special coverage live from London and the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. This is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight and on this special edition of the program. And here is what we have for you coming up. Down to the wire, the 11th hour trip and last-minute deal. Will it be enough to get Theresa May's Brexit deal over the line? Read the fine print. The UK's Attorney General says the legal risk of the much-contested backstop remains in a blow to the UK Prime Minister. No third chances. The EU lays down the law if MPs reject the Brexit agreement tonight. Forecasting May, what this vote could mean for the future of the UK Prime Minister. And sleepless in Strasbourg. Jean-Claude Juncker gets cheeky in tonight's Raw Moment. All right, welcome to this program tonight and to a potentially historic evening for the future of the UK and the EU. Now, in about 2 hours, British MPs will vote on Theresa May's Brexit agreement, a deal complete with a last-minute change won in Strasbourg last night. But after a big blow to May's plan today, there are no guarantees. May is fighting for more than just Brexit. Her political life may well be on the line, and she insists her final dash to Strasbourg worked and that she has won the legally binding changes she needs. But today came the legal advice that Mrs. May had been dreading. Now, the Attorney UK General Geoffrey Cox, he says that despite months of haggling, negotiating and pleading with the EU, the legal risks surrounding the Irish backstop have not changed. Now, that's been the key sticking point for those against the agreement. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of the debate. Well, there were very fun debates today at the Parliament, a lot of exchanges and definitely a lot of tension. Now, the UK Attorney General's job is to give that independent legal advice to the government, and he set out his advice today, his thoughts on the Brexit vote. Let's take a listen to that one.
Let me make it clear. The legal risk, as I set it out in my letter of the 13th of November, remains unchanged. The question for the House is whether, in the light of these improvements, as a political judgment, the House should now enter into those arrangements.
And joining us now on this dramatic day in Westminster is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, you were watching today the debate going on. There were a lot of exchanges, definitely getting a feel of how MPs are feeling. How is it looking like tonight, how people are going to be voting, and what are the chances that May could actually get her deal through?
Well, Theresa May has been battling this afternoon to try and convince many within her own party and indeed MPs across the boards that they should back her deal after that historic defeat back in January when MPs had their first chance to vote on her withdrawal agreement. It looks like she is going to lose yet again tonight, Tessa, given the fact that the Democratic Unionist Party, the Northern Irish MP supporting her Conservative government, and the ERG, those Brexiteers within the party, many of them essentially saying they cannot vote for this deal, that the legal guarantees they wanted are not there, that despite what she got in Strasbourg last night, it is not enough. And on that basis, as I said, it is likely she will lose the vote tonight. The question is almost not if, but by how much. And there is lots of rumours here at Westminster that if the majority by which she loses is not that big, that a third attempt later on this month, potentially after the next EU Council summit, that Theresa May could yet again bring back this vote to Parliament in the hope that she can finally get it over the line. But what is the mood of MPs from across the board? Earlier on today, I spoke to 4 different MPs from 4 different parties here at Westminster about what they thought of Geoffrey Cox's advice and how they thought the vote would go tonight. Let's have a listen. What's your impression of what Geoffrey Cox has said today? Has he killed off May's deal?
He's held it below the waterline as far as I can see. He's clearly been determined to stick to his word. He said that he wouldn't change his opinion if he didn't feel that the risk had lessened of Britain being able to get out of the backstop, as it were. and he doesn't think that risk has lessened, and therefore he's said what he said, which is to, I think, make it impossible for the ERG and the DUP, if they are to be true to their word, to support it.
We vote tomorrow on whether we should crash out without a deal, which would be catastrophic. I don't think Parliament will go anywhere near that. And if that's voted down, then we have the issue of a postponement. But that begs the whole question, what's the postponement for? Simply perpetuating this argument isn't about the existing deal, takes us nowhere. I would argue we've got to go now to the country, and the Prime Minister's got to test her deal with public opinion as against the option of staying in the European Union, in other words, a referendum.
Nothing's changed. And instead of focusing on the substance of our future relationship with our European partners, such as education, jobs, the economy, all these things that will be worst hit by Brexit, we're talking about process and tinkering with a deal that doesn't really mean anything to jobs and to people out there.
I think the European Union's given us a thoroughgoing punishment beating. I think they've been extremely difficult and intransigent all the way through. They've given us absolutely nothing whatsoever, and I despise them for it. The way they've handled this negotiation is precisely why we want to leave the European Union. These blighters think they're pretty clever fellows. We Brits are going to show them they're not.
Well, it has been a pretty torrid day yet again for Theresa May. Let's get the view, though, of what Jonathan List thinks. He is a deputy director of the think tank British Influence and has been following events here in Parliament and indeed the Brexit process over the last couple of years. Jonathan, first of all, just kind of talk us through what did Theresa May achieve last night in Strasbourg, and why is it not enough for many of her own MPs?
She achieved almost nothing. All that she managed was to solidify, if you like, the guarantees which the EU had already made in exchange of letters in January. But that was woefully inadequate. She set out to do two things. In fact, she promised two things. The first was that she would reopen the withdrawal agreement. The second, that she would actually try and replace the backstop with alternative arrangements. She didn't manage to do either of those things, and as such, the Attorney General was unable to adjust his legal advice that we cannot unilaterally exit the backstop, and that there can be no set exit date for that backstop.
Is there a little bit of glimmer of a hope in the sense that many with MPs within her party, even though they don't like her deal, now view that Brexit may well be in peril, or that there will be a softer form of Brexit, and actually, maybe not tonight, but maybe next week, might back her deal?
That is the calculus that everyone's talking about. It's not going to be about Remainers particularly. It's not going to be about Labour MPs. And I don't think it'll be about the DUP either, because I don't think they can vote for this deal under any circumstances. So what it will come down to is the hardcore Brexiters in the Tory party. Now, some of them will do exactly as you say. They will think, well, this Brexit is imperfect, but at least it gets us over the line and delivers us our life goal. But others will be mindful that the Brexit they've been dreaming about is never going to come to fruition. And what we have here is a woefully inadequate deal, which they will have to take the blame for. And so, you know, the old adage goes, never get what you wish for in life. It might be convenient for some to choose the kind of valiant defeat of remaining and a long and glorious martyrdom than actually accept this painful ordeal of May's Brexit, for which they'll have to take their share of responsibility.
And just finally, what does happen next if May's deal is voted down? You know, Britain is due to leave the European Union in 17 days. What happens next?
Well, inevitably, Parliament will vote against a no-deal scenario tomorrow, and then on Thursday, if that's when the vote is held, they will vote to request an extension to Article 50, which the EU will certainly grant. And then we move to the European Council next week, and that's when things get really interesting, because then we decide how long that extension is going to be. The EU is saying that if we stay after May the 23rd, we have to take part in European elections. Now that is going to be the next, sacred cow that we have to slay, because everyone's been saying we can't take part in these European elections. The first grown-up in the room is going to have to say, actually, we do have to, because there's no alternative other than May's deal or no deal.
Jonathan List, thank you very much indeed. There you go, one perspective here from Westminster among many. It is yet again quite a vocal night here outside Parliament with two different groups of supporters pitched against each other, those that want Britain to leave and those very much that want Britain to remain in. There is one glimmer of hope tonight, Tessa, for Theresa May. That is the possibility that many of those Brexiteers, despite saying they dislike her deal, despite saying that Geoffrey Cox's legal advice doesn't go far enough and that what she got in Strasbourg was not good enough, that it may well be that they back her deal. As I say, not tonight, but potentially next time, maybe after that EU Council summit, because they would rather her deal than Brexit, as they say, being put into peril. That essentially it could mean, of course, a second referendum or a general election and Brexit not happening at all. Things are very fluid here. Politics is very much in flux. Anything could really happen, but be in no doubt, Theresa May is not just battling tonight to save her withdrawal agreement, but battling also, it must be said, to save her premiership and control of this process.
All right, thanks for that, Darren McCaffrey. I can see the activity there behind you at Westminster. All right, joining me here in the studio is a British MEP and Deputy Leader of the Conservatives in the European Parliament, Jacqueline Foster, and a fellow British MEP and Leader of UKIP, Gerard Batten. All right, we heard from what Darren was saying there about potentially how MPs are going to vote, particularly the DUP and the ERG, the European Research Group within the Tory party. All right, does Theresa May actually, is it more than just wishful thinking, or is there actually a chance, I'll ask you, Jacqueline, that her deal will get voted through, or what is happening here?
Well, I'm absolutely very hopeful that the deal goes through. I think there is a huge risk when we're looking at Brexit now, and I think people are going to have to think long and hard. We've just listened to 4 members of Parliament, 3 of which from opposition parties who would never support any deal, so it wouldn't matter what the deal was on the table. And then another who seems to be on the other far side, basically, who again wouldn't support the deal. So I just think I was satisfied with the additional reassurances and legal issues that the Attorney General has actually negotiated and did explain, because there's just the one paragraph 19.
You were satisfied with that?
I am satisfied with that.
But
I
it
think
seems like he wasn't.
No, because what you have just pointed out, as others, is one paragraph out of an entire document. And if anybody had have listened to the Attorney General's question time today, basically in the House of Commons, he didn't flinch from any points that were brought to him, and he explained far more clearly, just in terms of where we'd managed to reinforce what the position was for the UK, i.e. Northern Ireland, as well as the Republic of Ireland.
But wasn't the last point the most important?
With the backstop position.
But was it the last point the most important, that the risk remains? OK, I'll put that to you,
This is what he said. He said basically the risk is slightly reduced, but isn't really reduced, because the whole point about this risk in these negotiations is that you have to prove bad faith on behalf, in our case, on behalf of the European Union, if they create problems for us. And it's a well-known principle in negotiations. You can't prove bad faith if both parties are trying to negotiate in terms of their own personal or national interest. So you'll never prove that anyway. So it doesn't actually help us at all. The whole thing was just words. And of course, he's a professional lawyer, and he's spoken in these very careful terms today, because he's not just an MP, but he has to protect his personal reputation and professional reputation as a lawyer.
Oh, I think that's to turn around and say that the Attorney General that actually has to represent the British government, whatever party, is acting in his own sort of personal capacity.
I didn't say that. I said that he. No, I didn't say that. I said he has. I said that he is a professional lawyer with a professional reputation to keep, which is why he's been very careful about the words he's used, because he is not going to just say something is when it isn't, because it has more than just political consequences for him, but his reputation as a lawyer.
That's not right at all.
And he knows,
no, that's not correct.
He knows that these are just loads of words that don't actually mean anything at the end of the day.
What more can the EU do? These are legally binding. It's said in the document as well that you cannot reopen the withdrawal agreement, but here you have the most that the EU can give in terms of giving that confidence.
I think this is why it will fail tonight.
So but it is assuming. So basically, Brexiteers are assuming, like yourself, are assuming that this is going to be based on bad faith.
I think the big problem that we've had for the whole of the last 2.5 years is we have a Prime Minister and a government and a majority of the House of Commons and House of Lords that don't want to leave anyway, which is why we've ended up with this ridiculous agreement that nobody wants. It doesn't satisfy Remainers who don't want to leave, and it doesn't satisfy Leavers who want to leave, because under this it's a not really leaving withdrawal agreement. And don't forget, if I can make the point, the withdrawal agreement just sets out the basis that we leave, but it is the political declaration that will form the basis for the ongoing relationship agreement, and that binds us into the EU in all kinds of ways. So we are really heading for a not really leaving deal, even if it was accepted.
No,
Well, you probably haven't read it.
I can listen to your points all night. However, if we look at Northern Ireland, and it's not just the DUP, we have a good working relationship with 10 members of Parliament from the DUP, which was agreed at the last election. But the DUP doesn't represent the entire population of Northern Ireland or the electorate. And even when the original withdrawal agreement came forward last November, businesses, the fishermen, the farmers, they have all said that they want this withdrawal agreement put in place. And they are supportive of that. And I would urge, therefore, my colleagues in the DUP to listen to them too. I have family who come from Northern Ireland. I would never support a position where Northern Ireland, as part of the United Kingdom, ended up in jeopardy. But I don't believe it's ever been in the EU's interests either to put us in a position where we were then left in limbo after a period of time. I don't believe that that's the case.
That there are people, there are growing, maybe politicians who would actually prefer a no deal, that this might be the better option? Is that growing?
I don't think it is growing, but I believe there's always been a hardcore from both sides, whether the Remainers or whether they hardcore leavers, that wouldn't mind having a no deal. They think that I think I've said it before, they think that the answer to everything is Norway plus.
Your colleagues probably think
I've said Norway plus plus, or
Norway
they've
plus
also said
the
it may be another plus plus. I've said the rate they're going when we're looking at the Labour Party. The only thing Jeremy Corbyn's talked about today was not the withdrawal agreement. He's talking about actually what we need to do in the future.
This whole thing about
they'll end up with momentum plus plus.
We don't want Norway plus. We don't want Switzerland plus. We want to leave. Now, the only way that we're ever going to leave is by doing it under our own steam and leaving. No, it's not at any cost.
Okay.
It's at our benefit because we will take control of the process. And all this stuff about trade, we can go on to Article 24 of the WTO terms, if we so wish, and the EU could agree that as well, whereby everything stays the same for up to 10 years while we negotiate a new trading relationship. This whole thing... you've had quite a long go, so let me finish.
No, because
you've had quite a long go. No, I am right.
No, you're not.
You can go on Article 24 if you want to, or we could say to the EU, you can have continued tariff-free trade, or we go on to WTO terms. It's up to you. It's your decision because it will be anyway. And then we can sort out all the other myriad of EU laws which have been passed over us, but we'll only do that if we take control of the process.
Okay. We're running out of time on this. We'll leave it at that for now. As we mentioned, now the main stumbling block for the Brexit deal surrounding the controversial backstop or the Irish border, we brought that up earlier already, and the day began with some, cautious optimism from the Irish Prime Minister, and here he is.
In many ways, Brexit has been a dark cloud over us for many months, and in particular the threat of no deal. A positive vote tonight can remove that cloud and restore confidence and optimism in Britain, Ireland and across the European Union. We now need to see the withdrawal agreement ratified by Westminster and the European Parliament without further delay, so that we can get on with the important work of building a new relationship between the EU and the UK, and between the UK and Ireland post-Brexit.
Well, our correspondent, Shona Murray, she's been talking to Irish MEPs here in Strasbourg today, and she's joining me now from the Parliament. Shona, the core of all of this really is the Irish backstop. So you have been talking to the Irish MEPs here. What have they been telling you?
Well, it's a broad church of MEPs that represent Ireland in the European Parliament, Tessa. So from the sort of centre right to the far left. And so rarely would you ever get them united on any issue. But one thing they're united on is what the Irish government and the European Union has been doing to protect the Good Friday Agreement. And they say the only way of doing that is by having the backstop, making sure the backstop isn't diminished in any way, by having a time limit to it, by having a unilateral withdrawal. And I spoke to some MEPs, again, a broad church, and here's what they had to tell me about tonight's vote.
I think we have gone as far as we can. President Juncker said it very clearly last night. He said sometimes a country is given a second chance, and if you are, you take it. There will be no third chance. So he said it clearly. I don't think Ireland should move. The UK have to sort out their own issues.
All we can do is sit back and see what the United Kingdom are going to do. What will they do tomorrow? If they fail to agree to withdrawal agreement tonight, will they vote, which they would be expected to, hopefully, not to crash out? And then the merry-go-round would probably start again.
I don't think there's any better deal in town, and I think if they voted this through the House of Commons, it would solve an awful lot of problems.
At this stage, we're bystanders. It's done. The second chance was last night here in Strasbourg. There is no third chance.
So, Tessa, there you go. A broad church of Irish MEPs, but all of the same position that the backstop has to remain in place. We heard there from the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar. That was very much early this morning when there was a level of cautious optimism that perhaps Theresa May could get this deal over the line in the House of Commons. When I spoke to those MEPs, it was clear at that stage that Geoffrey Cox wasn't going to be able to endorse this message. So I have to say, as we heard there, the MEPs saying that they would remain resolute in defending the backstop, remain resolute in defending the European Union's position. Even people like Luke Ming Flanagan, a far left MEP who is incredibly Eurosceptic on most days, but even he is urging Theresa May to go ahead with this deal, saying basically it's the only deal in town. So that is a really quite a rare thing to see. Now, I've been speaking to sources here in the European Parliament and back in Ireland and in Brussels who are really fearful of what's going to happen over the next few hours. They say all bets are off, that there is no more to give from Jean-Claude Juncker or the European Union, and even if they did, they could never trust that Theresa May could get it over the line in the House of Commons. Tessa.
All right, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Shona Murray, there giving us the perspective from the Irish MEPs. All right, joining us now to discuss this is Matt Carthy. He is an Irish MEP who sits with the GUE-NGL group here in the European Parliament. All right, Matt, what is the view? Shona there was mentioning, talking to the different MPs from the different parties in Ireland. The backstop still is crucial here, but nothing really has changed, really.
Yeah,
has it?
Well, no, nothing has changed. In fact, we've had so many movements over the past day and a half that we're back where we started, so to speak. And yes, the backstop is crucial. The withdrawal agreement as it currently stands, let's be very clear,
are you happy?
is
the
least worst option. There is no such thing as a good Brexit from an Irish point of view. Brexit is going to damage all of Ireland. And what we're going to see tonight, apparently, in the House of Commons is once again British politicians voting against the directly expressed wishes of the people of the north of Ireland. So I think what we're going to see now is a whole new level of discussion in terms of where the future of the entire island of Ireland lies in a post-Brexit scenario.
We just had Jacqueline Foster earlier who was saying that actually if you read the document, it is not entirely empty as others would analyse it. But are you happy with what Theresa May had brought back from last night?
Well, from an Irish point of view, the withdrawal agreement and the backstop within it and the protections that offered, recognising that they don't go as far as many of us would have liked from an Irish point of view, is the best possible deal at this stage because Brexit creates so many complications, so many implications and potentially devastating consequences for our political, our economic and our social development as a whole island, and particularly the Good Friday Agreement.
I'm sorry, I just don't get this. Why would an independent sovereign nation like Ireland feel that it cannot exist outside of the European Union, or if Northern Ireland, as you part of the UK, lives, that suddenly it's going to cause all this national devastation? It would be this is a totally false argument that's been created over the Irish border. You have two sovereign nations, the UK and the Republic of Ireland, who, when the UK leaves, can carry on their relations in terms of trade and people moving backwards and forwards across the border, just as they do now, if they wanted to. This isn't an Irish border problem. This is a Brussels problem who created this problem in order to try and stop the UK leaving the European Union.
All that exposes is the ignorance that lies at the heart of the Brexit process when it comes to Ireland. It is a complete lack of understanding of how Ireland operates and how the border in particular has impacted, because the border we have in Ireland is already too hard. The border region, for example, has the highest levels of immigration, of poverty, of the lowest rates of investment, either public or private. And the reason for that is because borders cost. that's recognised at an EU level. Unfortunately, isn't recognised within the Brexit here movement. And essentially, what is happening here is a lack of understanding of what the Good Friday Agreement was laid on. Because yes, the Irish and British governments are sovereign, but there's a disputed place which is the north of Ireland.
But
I mean, people in the north of Ireland have said they want to remain part of the European Union.
I can understand where Matt's coming from, because he wants the Northern Ireland to become part of the Republic of Ireland, and that's a perfectly understandable point of view from his political perspective. But there is a border, yes, there's a border with a currency border. There's goods moved backwards and forwards. All the goods are checked in warehouses before they get to the border anyway. So there's no reason why what we've got now couldn't continue perfectly normally if the Republic of Ireland and the UK agreed that. Brussels doesn't need to be involved.
Well, can I ask a question of how this would work? So, you, as a self-confessed Brexiteer, want to see Britain negotiate free trade agreements?
If that's appropriate, we can trade under WTO terms.
Okay, so say you move outside into the WTO terms, and you enter into a free trade agreement with Mercosur countries, for example, and decide that you're going to import their cheaply produced food imports into the British market. If that enters into the north of Ireland, and if there aren't border controls, well, then that means that the EU market is contaminated with this cheaply produced food, and that creates the border scenario. So what we're saying is that there is no circumstances that we're going to allow that to happen, because that damages our farmers north and south.
What you're saying is that then we shouldn't allow our people who are on lower incomes to be able to buy cheaper food, because that actually is damaging to people who produce dearer food.
No, what I'm saying is,
the purpose of trade,
you can do what you want.
The purpose of trade is to be the most beneficial terms for the broad mass of people. So this is an argument for actually getting out of the common agricultural policy and taking control of trade policy. Not because, don't forget, what the European Union is not a free trade area. It's a customs union. It's designed to put barriers up from trade from outside of the European Union.
If people are mad enough to believe what Gerard has said, that is absolutely within their right. And the people of England and the people of Wales can decide to do that. But they don't get to take part of my country down that cul-de-sac with them, because what he is proposing in that instance is withdrawing from the common agricultural policy, reverting to a cheap food policy. Everybody loses. Our farmers, our communities, and our economy. And Ireland
I'll
give you the last one.
Go ahead. You have to move on.
How does everybody lose if you can reduce prices for the broad mass of people?
Okay.
Because it puts our farmers off.
All right, we'll leave it at that for now.
Farmers are more important.
Clearly, this is such a contentious part. We'll have to leave that argument for now. We've heard from the politicians, but now we have to hear from the people who will actually be affected by Brexit, which you have been both talking about. Let's look at what Londoners had to say this morning ahead of tonight's Brexit vote.
I think it's going to get rejected. Well, I very much hope so. Voted Remain, European, so I very much hope it's thrown out.
You don't have a clear indication if the MPs are going to vote for May's deal, what he's negotiating, or not.
I think that the general public just don't want Brexit anymore. I don't think they ever did. They just didn't realise it at the time.
It seems to me like nobody can make up their mind. Everybody is saying what's wrong with it, but nobody's coming up with any sort of solution.
People are starting to realise that it's just not going to happen. And it shouldn't, hopefully. I'm going to go skiing next week.
Okay, you heard that man who was saying probably British people don't want Brexit anymore.
Well, you talk to one man in the street. I could take you to other places in London where everybody would agree that they voted to leave and they want to get out. So it depends where you go and who you are. I don't want another referendum, because we don't need one. We had a referendum. But I think if there was a referendum on do you want to leave or remain, actually leave would win by a bigger margin.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
Well, listen, as I say, whatever the people of England want to do, that's up to them. But the people in the north of Ireland already voted, and they voted overwhelmingly to remain part of the European Union. Unfortunately, the British government, for all their talk about consent, have decided to ignore that decision. The only way that we can actually protect those people to some degree is through the withdrawal agreement that is there. And it appears that tonight British MEPs by a significant majority are going to vote against the expressed wishes of the people of the north of Ireland. I think that's going to send a very strong signal in terms of the future constitutional questions.
All right, and no one.
I think the only thing we agree on is that they're going to vote against it.
Well, there you go. All right, out of time for this one. Coming up on Raw Politics, a final offer. That's what the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker had to say about the latest Brexit agreement. But what does the rest of the EU 27 think? That's still ahead. Don't go away.
you get a second chance. It is what we do with this second chance that counts, because there will be no third chance.
There will be no third chance. A strong message from Jean-Claude Juncker to British MPs there. But let's now turn our attention away from MPs and the House of Commons and focus on the rest of Europe, because the political drama in London is being watched very closely by politicians on the continent. Let's take a look.
Ich glaube, wenn ich mich anschaue und vielleicht auch meinen Kollegen aus Belgien, dass Druck auf uns von außen nicht das richtige Instrument ist, um zu Überzeugungen zu gelangen. Wir haben uns Mühe gegeben, auf die britischen Befindlichkeiten und auf die britischen Wünsche und auf die britischen Sorgen einzugehen.
The message to the British Parliament is a clear message. Through this new agreement, there are more guarantees for the UK.
Alors j'espère qu'ici on va avoir des nouvelles positives venant de Londres, mais on est prêt à toutes les situations. On a fait voter des textes en cas de no deal. Alors, on est prêt aussi, évidemment, s'il y a un accord, à le mettre en œuvre.
If Theresa May is again defeated tonight, then I think she should come to the conclusion that she perhaps should rather work more closely with the opposition.
Est-ce que le projet d'accord de séparation a-t-il changé d'une virgule? La réponse est non. Et donc, moi, la dramatisation opérée par le voyage in extremis de Madame May à Strasbourg fait partie de ce théâtre politique qui est devenu la question du Brexit. Est-ce que les spectateurs apprécient la pièce? Ça, c'est une autre chose, évidemment.
And here with me to discuss the reactions from the rest of the EU is a Swedish MEP, Anna-Maria Corazza-Bildt. She's from the European People's Party here at the Parliament. And back with us is British Conservative MEP Jacqueline Foster. All right, I'll start with you, Anna-Maria Corazza-Bildt, because the reaction here, everybody's watching. You know, everybody, it's almost as if people are tired already. Is there no more goodwill left? Is this the last straw? As Jean-Claude Juncker said, no more third chances.
I think last night's agreement has really been a show of enormous goodwill on the part of the European Union to really stretch out, reach out, go the extra way to provide reassurances, legally binding safeguards that the backstop will be temporary and that there's going to be, everything will be made to speed up the future relations agreement so that there's not going to be a need of the backstop at all. And I really hope that that is going to be a boost for the Commons tonight to approve the orderly withdrawal agreement with the European Union. It's the absolute best possible deal, and it's a way to really take responsibility.
Well, they said that the last time, and now they moved a little. Does this mean that they can move a little again, or this is it? You think this is final?
Well, we're 17 days from the D-Day.
Mm-hmm. So that's it. Final. I want to ask you, because when we
well, the ball is in London now.
Sure, and when we hear Jean-Claude Juncker speaking like that, it's you know, it makes you wonder whether the EU, the rest of the EU, is actually ready for a no deal, because they're like, okay, enough. Maybe if you vote for a no deal, then that's it. Do you think the EU is ready for a no deal?
Well, first of all, I don't think no deal is the answer, and I don't think the EU wants no deal either. I personally believe I supported the withdrawal agreement in November. I always understood there were certain sensitivities, certainly with regards to Northern Ireland, where I have come from. I've mentioned it before originally. And I think we've worked very hard. I think both sides have worked very hard to come up with some of the reassurances. So we've moved now from legal certainties, and I agree with the comments that Anna-Maria made, to really these are now political decisions.
Exactly.
And it is seriously about goodwill. And I think that, you know, I've had many an argument in this place for 20 years. And I think unless you've been in this place negotiating, you don't really understand very often across the channel back in the UK that you do go to the wire, that we do compromise at the end of the day. But it's something that we have to do. So I am confident that we have got to the right position. I am urging my colleagues back in London to support this, not least because business industry, supply chains, they need this certainty, and so do all of the people that work in the UK.
The theatrics is part of it, the down to the wire is probably part of the strategy. But
I agree with Jacqueline. I mean, the consequence of a no deal will be so devastating, first of all, for ordinary people. And then also for business, for everyone. I met the other way, it was an UK living in Spain. she doesn't know if she will be a European citizen with all the rights or a migrant with completely different rights. In just 2 weeks, if the children can study, if she can get a pension, if they continue to live in Spain, we talk about people, and then the uncertainty is devastating, first of all, for the UK economy, and also for the rest of Europe. So it's time for responsibility. It's time for London to put its acts together and look at the long-term interest of their people and not party politics.
But if I reverse the question, because Jean-Claude Juncker also said, well, maybe there will be no Brexit. Is the UK ready for a no Brexit? Or, how will that move forward then?
17.4, it was the biggest vote in our history. 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU. The responsibility on the government of the day was to fulfil that. And this is what Theresa May has been doing, balancing either side, because people have very strong, passionate views. We understand all of that, but we're now getting to the position, for all the points that we have raised, a decision now needs to be made, because we do need to move on to the future agreement. What also came out of these talks with the Attorney General, with the EU as well, was to move at a quicker pace to try and make sure now that we're getting the future arrangements in place, because that's what's going to be very important to make sure that the agreement goes to plan.
Yeah, and so you don't think, as I was saying earlier, that there might not be a Brexit according to Juncker. And from the point of view of the rest of the EU, I know you say that from the UK point of view, the vote must be respected. But then from the EU's point of view, it's fine, actually. If there's no Brexit, you would welcome the UK back. That's a possibility that you would actually welcome.
Of course, we would go with what the people of the UK will decide through their representative. But we have to think about the consequences also. I don't think anyone is prepared for no deal. How can you prepare really for no deal? It is so catastrophic. That's why it's really important that there is a responsible vote tonight, and that politics, party politics, are left aside. This is a historical moment for the future of the people of the UK, and for our children as well.
With the European parliamentary elections coming up, actually quite close, and in the letter of Juncker to Tusk last night, we saw that he said if it cannot extend beyond the European parliamentary elections, because then the UK will be legally obliged to actually hold that election. And that you don't see that happening.
Well, I mean, there are quite a few complexities with regards to that. But where Anna Marie is right, we now have to take responsibility. We made the decision in the UK, and we can't keep messing about either.
Right.
So we can't keep blaming the EU on the one hand, saying, well, we're not progressing, but at the same time not taking responsibility when we have moved forward and we have actually put in place many plans that actually we think will work very well in the future.
I think from both Anna Maria and Jacqueline are saying that there has to be a decision made tonight, and I think that's what we will all be waiting for. We know what decision you want to come out of it. We're closely watching that. All right, still ahead on Raw Politics, fighting for her political life. We cross back to London later to talk about what tonight's vote could mean for Theresa May's future. That's after the break.
The danger for those of us who want to deliver, to have faith with the British public and deliver on their vote for Brexit, is that if this vote is not passed tonight, if this deal is not passed, then Brexit could be lost.
She was already having a hard time speaking there. Well, that was the UK Prime Minister in the House of Commons earlier. Now, after 2 years of talks, tonight's vote really is a moment of truth for Theresa May. And so what could it all mean for her political future? Could she survive this? Well, our London correspondent Vincent McAvaney joins us now from Downing Street. I think, Vincent, this is the question everyone is asking. Can Theresa May actually survive this if her deal fails a second time?
Good evening, Tessa. Well, for all of the criticisms levelled at Theresa May, I don't think anyone can doubt that she is the great survivor. At every twist and turn of the Brexit process, when we thought that she was done for, she has managed to cling on, in part because no one really has wanted to take over her job during these difficult few years of negotiations. But today in the Commons, she really needed a Churchillian level of performance to try and get MPs on side. And once again, like we saw at the Conservative Party conference back in 2017, it was her voice that failed her. She immediately got up and it was croaking and incredibly strained. She did try to make a joke of it, saying you should hear what Jean-Claude Juncker sounds like, but the Prime Minister didn't give a level of a performance in the Commons that was going to win over many MPs. There are some, Sir Robert Sims and Greg Hands in the past couple of hours, and Nigel Evans, who have said that they've changed their position and they'll now back the Prime Minister's deal, but it still looks like she is in for a crushing defeat. And then what is going to happen? We know we've got these votes coming up tomorrow on whether or not they will go ahead with no deal. It's likely the MPs will block no deal, and then the one on Thursday about extending Article 50, and that would run until the time of the European elections later on this year. Theresa May said for years, over 100 times in public, that the 29th of March was going to be Brexit Day. She then went back on that. She said there wouldn't be a general election. She went back on that. So really the question is now, with Theresa May likely having lost twice on her withdrawal agreement, what will she be willing to do? I cannot see her wanting to have another general election. She doesn't need to have one until 2022, and she doesn't want to risk a Jeremy Corbyn government. That is one of the things that she's able still to kind of convince her MPs to follow her on, is to try and stop that eventuality. So could she possibly have a second referendum? Might she take her withdrawal agreements to the public and see whether she can get support from them? It's something that the Labour Party are now backing. That is their position. So perhaps they could cut a deal that it's Theresa May's withdrawal agreement is one of the options and then Remain as the other. At the moment, it is still unclear. I've spoken to MPs in the House of Commons this afternoon. They can't see what it is that she can do. She has stalled for so much time, but that really now just can't go on. One little detail though, inside Downing Street, they're fixed on one date apparently, the 28th of May, because if the Prime Minister stays until that date, it means at the very least she's beaten Gordon Brown's record of time in number 10 Downing Street.
All right, thank you for that. Our correspondent there, Vincent McAvenny in London. And joining us in the studio, we have a German MEP from the European People's Party and Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, David McAllister, and a British Labour MEP, Nina Gill. Well, last night, there were some people who were shocked, some people who were surprised that Theresa May was here, and some people who knew or were expecting it. But do you think that the theatrics that Theresa May did last night was also partly a fight for her political survival, not just her deal, but for herself as well?
I think what we saw yesterday night was that the European Union is committed to get this withdrawal agreement now done. And we are running out of time. We are seriously running out of time, and we should concentrate on our future relationship, where a lot of the issues which are discussed in the moment can then be resolved. So this was once again a final move to show willingness and cooperation, and now every single member of the House of Commons will have to shoulder his or her own responsibility. I
mean, last night we had an MEP here who was saying that this was a humiliation for Theresa May to actually have to come here. You're seeing it in a positive light, but some people probably don't. How do you see what she did last night? Was it also a fight for her political survival?
I would say it was. She's always trying to reach out to the very far right in her party, if you can put it that way. So she wanted to try and show, look, I'm doing everything, because already people in UK were starting to blame the EU, saying EU are not giving us anything more. Well, what was quite clear yesterday evening, yes, the European Union tried to clarify, but she clearly doesn't read things very well. I mean, it was clear from day one that the EU were limited as to what they could give her. I mean, she has put herself in this impossible situation by the red lines she's drawn. You know, it's a very difficult situation to manoeuvre for anybody. So I would say she's always been fighting for her political survival. That's why she's boxed herself in by giving the right in her party all the red lines, and now she doesn't have any more room to manoeuvre.
So do you agree with that, that actually, even if it's seen, you see it as the European Union having moved a step forward, it was a very, very minimal step, because, you know, Nina was pointing out that their hands are tied. They can't really make much of any move.
The withdrawal agreement was negotiated for 18 months between the EU and the UK government. And these were very firm negotiations, and in the end both sides had to compromise, and this is the result which we wanted to present to the British side.
The assurances that were given last night.
Yes, but that's the most the European Union can do. There's nothing much more we can do. If the UK is interested in getting an orderly Brexit done, they will have to accept what has now been negotiated. And Jean-Claude Juncker was very clear when he said, This is a second chance. There won't be a third chance. So once again, it's up to the members of the House of Commons to decide if this is the way forward or not.
But the problem is that many in her own party and others, I mean, my party have said this deal was not acceptable to them. And in fact, this has been clear from all the opposition parties. And while she alluded to reach out to them, she made no significant changes. You know, in politics, we learn here in the European Parliament, you have to get consensus. You cannot just stick to your own deal and say, I'm going to get this through. It's my deal.
Not happy
nothing.
with it. Your party's not happy with it, clearly. So
no,
voting
we've always
against
said the deal was not acceptable to us, and so have others within her own party who've said the deal is not acceptable. So rather than listen and change her deal, she wants to keep the same deal and keep putting it back to the House of Commons, which clearly is not going to
deal. To what? Again, you mentioned it yourself. Everybody's limited in the moves that they can make. So change it to what? What would appease the Labour?
Well, clearly for us, we want a softer Brexit. I mean, Labour's position is that we don't want this hard Brexit that
which she can't do because of her own.
Exactly. And so we would prefer to stay in the customs union because that resolves the backstop problem in Ireland, and it is better for all our manufacturing industries. So that's been our position all along. So now I think what Labour's position is that, if we can't get a deal, we definitely don't want no deal at all. It's not in the interest of the British people. So what we will be looking for is that if either Parliament takes control and takes the decisions away from the government, or we try to find a way to have another referendum and put it back to the people.
All right, just very quickly, because the feeling is that it's going to be voted down tonight. And what would be your reaction to that? I mean, what could possibly... So we know what's going to happen the next few days. If it's voted down tonight, then what?
Well, if the deal is voted down once again, it's up to the House of Commons to show a constructive way forward.
So really the vote is... the ball is in the UK
Look, we all want to avoid a no-deal Brexit. I think that's common sense. Okay. But those who are going to vote against the deal must then be ready to show a way forward which is acceptable for both sides.
Okay, we'll leave it at that for now, because we have a lot more coming up on Raw Politics. We'll cross back live to London for the latest on tonight's vote. Plus, Jean-Claude Juncker gets Twitter talking with a cheeky comment about the UK Prime Minister Theresa May. That's still ahead in the programme. Welcome back to Raw Politics and this special program as we count down to the culmination of 2 years of Brexit negotiations. Now, there's only 1 hour to go until MPs have to vote on Theresa May's Brexit deal. And let's head over to London now. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, he is right in the middle of all the action. Darren, take us through what's happening there right now.
Well, Tessa, we know that Brexit is certainly an issue that has divided this country into two camps, those that want to remain, much like these people waving their EU flags outside Westminster here, it must be said, every day for the last couple of months, to those who very much want to leave the European Union. And then, Tessa, look at this. Essentially, the world's international media assembled here for tonight's vote. Hundreds of journalists from across the world, not just from Britain or Europe, but indeed from elsewhere as well. How is that vote going to go, though? Let's bring in Joey Jones. I will slip over this side. He is a former advisor to Theresa May. Joey, there's lots of talk that Theresa May is going to lose this vote tonight. It seems almost inevitable. The question is, by how much?
Much too much. I think that the only way in which she could genuinely have said that this strategy that she's pursued of grinding on towards a cliff edge and trying to persuade people they needed to come to her side, faced with the jeopardy of no deal, could have been if she got it down to not just double figures but maybe a couple of dozen, and then she could persuasively go back to other European leaders at the European Council at the end of next week and say, look, one last heave. But I think if the numbers are up to 100 or more, it just means that whole strategy, if you can call it a strategy, has run out of road.
And so then what next? I mean, is this, does she have to go? Is there an extension to Article 50? What happens next?
Well, I think that she is now personally invested in what is being voted on tonight. I mean, that might sound a strange thing, but what I mean is, last time around you had things like a Brady Amendment, a Malthouse Compromise. They were things with other people's names on that she was able to say, well, yes, these are ideas that have come up from the grassroots of parliamentarians, if you like, that I can see there is merit in, and we will advance them because European leaders need to see, and Michel Barnier and his team need to see, that this is coming from the coalface of the democratic coalface, if you like, of Parliament. Well, last night she personally invested herself in the whole pantomime, the whole choreography around saying, this is it, it's the final deal, as Jean-Claude Juncker said. We're not getting any further. It's the right deal. Let's get it done, as she said, with her faltering voice to her cabinet and then in Parliament this afternoon. And it's not going to happen. So on that basis, yes, I think it will at some time dawn on us in this country and parliamentarians that they're going to have to seek another route. Might take a couple of weeks. We probably will eke out a few more days up to the EU Council. But beyond that, I think that they're going to have to look for something new and someone new.
Joey Jones, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We will have full coverage tonight here on Euronews of the vote, along with all these other journalists. It's going to be an interesting few days in British and European politics, Tessa.
Indeed, Darren, and we are all watching. Now, still with us here in the studio to discuss this is German MEP David McAllister from the European People's Party and British Labour MEP Nina Gill. All right, so I'll just very quick comment from you on this. If we do end up extending Article 50, if we end up until Thursday, there's another vote, is the EU prepared for that?
I think the EU would be prepared, but it's up to the UK government then to ask for a postponement of the withdrawal agreement. A few weeks wouldn't be the problem, but of course there should be a real reason why this is necessary. But of course the European elections from the 23rd to the 26th of May play an important role, because as long as a member state is a member state, it will probably be obliged to actually have elections take place in the country.
And that is not something British MPs will probably want to go through again. MEPs, that is.
I think it's something that House of Commons doesn't want to go through.
All right.
But I would say there is an acceptance in the House of Commons by MPs.
Just 5 seconds to finish
that
your
there
point.
will be some kind of an extension.
Well, there you go. All right, we have time for tonight's Raw Moment, which comes from the European Parliament here in Strasbourg, where Jean-Claude Juncker was welcoming the Prime Minister of Slovakia, but it seems he had other thoughts on his mind. Let's take a look.
Buongiorno, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Peter. Je vais vous confier un secret. J'ai peu dormi cette nuit à cause de Madame May. Mais suffisamment longtemps pour pouvoir rêver de la Slovaquie et de Bratislava.
He was just being cheeky there, wasn't he? Jean-Claude Juncker. You do expect comments like that from him. What's your reaction?
Well, clearly Jean-Claude has his reputation.
It's open to interpretation, and David is just laughing.
That's what he's like.
That is what he's like. You can actually rely on Jean-Claude Juncker to do that. All right, I just wanted you to finish your point, what you were saying earlier on whether if we were to reach an extension.
I think with an extension, clearly the worry is that the EU leaders will ask for what is the reason. And presently, you can't give a reason other than we don't have agreement on a deal. So proposals need to be put together that could be acceptable in the next few weeks. Whether that can be done before the 23rd of May, it's really questionable. And I would say if you need an extension, it needs to be much longer.
And can it be a longer extension? Just very quickly, can it actually go beyond the European elections? Does that make sense?
Well, you will have to consider that a member state is a member state, and as long as a member state is a member state is required to organize European elections, and we will have to consider this very carefully. What does this mean? Just let me make one point. The withdrawal agreement was concluded in November.
Right.
We are now at the beginning of March. For 100 days, we are showing patience. But really, it's finally up to the UK Parliament to make a decision.
And the first of those decisions happening tonight. And as you mentioned, the British MPs are getting ready for that historic vote in about an hour. And you can watch the live coverage and analysis right here on Euronews. And it starts now with the team at Euronews Tonight with Isabel Kumar.